Hi, and welcome to Uncle Scott's Kitchen. Today we're going to talk about the proverbial fried egg test. Now, what is the fried egg test? I've done a lot of videos on how to season and clean carbon steel skillets. And at the end of every one of those videos, I do the fried egg test. And what that is essentially demonstrating that the seasoning has been done correctly, that we have a natural non-stick surface on our pans, and that the pans are up and running and ready to cook. Essentially, you just fry an egg in the pan and make sure that when you swirl it around, the egg will slide all around the pan, just like a hockey puck. Although hopefully it tastes a little bit better. Now, I've done the fried egg test literally hundreds and hundreds of times. It's what I call breakfast. I cook fried eggs or omelets in my carbon steel skillets 5 times per week. Now, I'd like to cook in them 7 times per week, but my wife says I'm too fat and she's got me on 2 days a week of intermittent starvation. I mean fasting. Which, although annoying, I have to say actually works. I'm down 26 pounds. Pretty soon she's going to have to find something new to complain about. But knowing her, that won't be much of a problem. Anyway, back to the pans. Many people have written in and said, I love your seasoning videos, they work great. I've also gotten some feedback below the videos, and people have emailed in the website and said, I followed your directions to a T and the egg's still stuck. What's going wrong? And to me that didn't sound right. Something just didn't make sense. But then my sister and her family came to visit, and I had my carbon steel pans out here on the stove, and I told her about them, and she was going to cook breakfast for her kids. And she decided to fry some eggs. And she fried some eggs, and lo and behold, they stuck. In my pans that I season myself, that I use hundreds of times, and eggs never ever stick for me. So something is going wrong. I think the pans are seasoned correctly. I think people are having trouble with their egg cooking techniques. So today we're going to look at how to fry an egg correctly, how to make an omelet correctly in a carbon steel skillet. Help people pass the fried egg test and get their pans dialed in. And really, even though it's fun to do the fried egg test, that's not the end goal. The end goal is to be able to cook delicious eggs in a carbon steel skillet correctly so that people don't have to use Teflon or other harsh chemical non-stick pans. Okay, so what we're going to do is kind of go into a little bit more depth with the fried egg test, show where I think people might be having some problems and how to fix those. Then we're going to fry an egg, and then the process works essentially the same way for an omelet, so we're going to cook an omelet as well. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is I'm going to assume you have a properly seasoned carbon steel skillet. Shouldn't be too much trouble. If you have trouble with that, I have links to other videos showing how to do that. I have here a 11 7/8 inch Mapper, kind of a jack of all trades pan, has more angled sides. It works perfectly well. I've also got a DeBuyer 9 or 9.5 inch dedicated omelet pan. I really like it for cooking eggs. But it doesn't matter, they both work equally well. The next thing is, it's important to have everything ready to go before you start cooking. That means get your eggs out, get them ready to go. Once the butter and the pan are ready, that's not the time to go to the fridge to hunt around for an egg. Have everything ready to go. So from a 10,000 foot level, the process is pretty simple. We're going to heat up a pan, put in butter, put in eggs, and cook them. Things, however, can go off the rails. So I think things are going wrong in 3 main areas. The first is the temperature of the pan. The pan is either too hot or too cold. The second is when to add the eggs. It's very important to add the eggs at the correct time. And the third thing is you need to add the eggs properly. You can't just dump them in from 4 or 5 inches up. You got to add them slowly and gently. So the first 2 problems are going to be solved by listening to and watching the butter. When we put the butter in the pan, it's going to tell us if the pan is at the right temperature and when to add the eggs. Along those lines, you want to use real butter. Now, I've had some people write in and say, of course nothing sticks in your pans, look at all that butter you're using. That's not exactly true. If you look at some of the directions that came with the pans, for example, this DeBuyer or DeBuyer if you want to try and pronounce it in French, They say to use butter and oil at the same time. So I'm not using any oil, I'm just using butter. The second thing is, if you look at the pan after you take your eggs out, most of that butter still stays in the pan. It's not being absorbed by the eggs. So don't worry about using a little bit too much butter. Also, use real butter. Don't use margarine or some sort of substitute product or some sort of spray canola oil. I don't like using any of the spray stuff in my carbon steel skillets. The next thing is, it's very important to get to know your stove. I'm cooking on a gas stove and I have my choice of a small, a medium, or a large burner. After doing this hundreds of times, I know I want to use my small burner and I want to turn the flame up to high. And it takes about 1.5 minutes for my pan to warm up properly. I know that from trial and error. You got to learn your own stove. Learn how long it takes for your pan to get correct. Now, how do you know when your pan is at the correct temperature? The butter is going to tell us. When you put the butter in the hot pan, if it just barely starts to melt and slide around, that's too cold. If it goes immediately to a big flash of steam, that's too hot. We're not searing a 22-ounce ribeye steak. We're cooking a delicate egg. So you don't want it way too hot. You don't want your pan up to the smoking point. What you want is just solidly hot. You want to put the butter in, it should melt immediately and start to crackle, but not evaporate in a flash of steam. So to demonstrate, this is too cool, this is too hot, this is just right. Now when I say the butter is going to tell us when it's ready, that's almost literally true, because you want to hear the crackling. That lets you know that the moisture content, the water that's trapped in the butter, is evaporating away. Once that is evaporated away, the crackling will stop, the bubbling will stop, and you've got a good layer of pure fat in the pan and the butter are ready for your eggs. What you've got there, once the moisture evaporates away, a good layer of fat, and what you want to do is gently and slowly add your eggs on top of that layer. If you crack an egg and drop it in from up here, it's going to splatter and almost break that surface tension of the oil and fat and just kind of bond to the pan. You don't want to do that. You want to put the egg in very, very close to the pan, or if you have trouble cracking the yolks, or if that's too much for you, what you can do is get a coffee cup or teacup. Before you get started, go ahead and crack your eggs in there and then just gently pour the eggs into the pan. Okay, enough talking. Let's cook an egg. I've had my pan heating up. I've got it to the correct temperature. I've got the butter in there. It's melting and bubbling and crackling. I'm going to wait for that bubbling and crackling to stop. Then in goes the egg. And I like to let it set up for 10-15 seconds or so. Let the white set up just a little bit. Then if everything is going correctly, give it a good shake and it should slide right around. And that, quite simply, is the fried egg test. So to cook an omelet, we use pretty much the same technique. You want to get your omelet mix ready to go before you start heating your pan. I like to take 2 eggs, a teaspoon of water, some salt and pepper, then beat them up pretty well, but don't overbeat them. You don't want too much air in there. Then heat your pan, put in your butter, wait for it to stop bubbling and crackling and sizzling, and then listen as you pour in your omelet mix. It's going to make a definitive sound. If it doesn't make that sound, the pan was too cool. You can shake and kind of yank on the pan over and over and kind of do a French omelet. Or if you don't want to do that, if you have a filling, you can do a folded omelet, kind of a Western style. This is where the wide spatula really comes in handy. And once you've folded your omelet over, it's just a matter of how well done you like your eggs. I like mine with just a little bit of color, but not too much. And if you get really fancy, you can flip it without the spatula. Okay, just to recap. For good fried eggs and omelets, you got to get everything ready to go. You got to heat your pan to the correct temperature. Put in the butter, listen to the butter. Wait for it to stop crackling, wait for it to stop bubbling. Gently add in your eggs. Let them set up for 10 seconds or so. Then shake the pan and they should slide around. Or if you're making an omelet, you can do a French omelet and stir it, keep shaking it, or add your toppings and fold it over. And there you have it, the fried egg and omelet test.